Okay, welcome everybody. I think it's time to get started. I'm Cliff Lynch, the director of CNI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this breakout session, which is a part of the CNI 2020 Spring Virtual Meeting. The topic today is, as indicated, it's not what libraries hold, it's who libraries serve. This is a joint presentation by Xuemao Wang of the University of Cincinnati and Roger Schonfeld of Ithaka SNR. And it, I think, will be very timely in light of recent events, although it describes work that happened before the world changed primarily. We'll take questions at the end. Diane Goldenberg-Hart will moderate the questions. There is a Q&A tool down at the bottom of your screens, and feel free to queue up questions at any point during the presentation as they occur to you, although, as I say, we will address them all at the end. And with that, I will just say welcome, and I will pass it over to Xuemao, who I believe is going to speak first. It's all yours.
Thank you, Cliff. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your participation. And Roger and I are going to do this. We're going to speak about 30 minutes. Then we're going to engage you with the dialogue, with the conversation. This session meant to be participatory and interactive, right? So I'm going to do set the context. Roger, the next slide. To talking about the the task force, which I led as the chair, and some of the work process we have done. First, let me make the statement. This report and all the works has been done pre the COVID-19. In today's situation, if you're thinking about what's going on now in the world and around us, I'm quite sure the dimension of the scope of this work might be quite different in terms of the user-centric perspective, right? Next slide. So a little bit about the Ohio Link. For those of you participate, you might be knowing the Ohio Link. The organization has been emerging now. It's the 27th years or something like that for the history. We have been very much the leadership in many ways. This is the one of the largest in the world, the Academic Library Consortium. We have 118 higher education libraries in the organization, from the 5 AR libraries to many of the research universities, other research R2 universities, doctoral universities, and to all the way to the 2 years and the community from the both public and private sector, right? So this is one of the largest Ohio, the consortium, library academic consortium. We have been very much in the leadership in terms of the leading the using the technology. From the early 90s, we were able to create the one of the first shared catalog system. Right. So in the many of the change encountered in our environment, the Ohio Link membership libraries has going through a lot of just like you, going through a lot of transformational changes of our service scope. So the drive behind this work is really about this transformational change. The service scope go beyond much more than what we call the print primacy. That service centrally surrounding with the print, with the physical connections, has been passed. Right? So those are the situation drive the library thinking about what we do for our technology. Another thing trigger us to start this work is by when we started, the market was on the way to be more, the IRS market is on the way to be more consolidation. By the middle of our work, we got the acquisition from the information about the ProQuest, purchase the innovative, become part of the Xlibris, right? So those market consolidation was part of our broader environmental scan. We were constantly watch over this project. And the market consolidation certainly bring the question, which Roger is going to talking about more, about is this the direction we want to see in terms of the stimulate of the innovation, right? In general speaking, the tremendously drive and the background about this work is really focused on this transformational change. The service scope has been much broadened than the collections and the printing materials, and our needs are really outpaced what the market can offer to us. We were somewhat talking about before forming the task force, the community, Ohio Link community was collectively debate, and for the long time, about what we were going, a lot of frustration and about the current IRS system, which is innovative, we're using, and we don't know what we were going to do and where they're going, and all of these are leads to the urgency, the sense of the urgency in looking about what we're going to do about our system. Next, please. So in the end, about approaching the end of the 2018, and the community and emerge the consensus is, instead of looking for next generation of the library system to replace potentially about our innovative, and we were emerged the consensus about we should get together just to make some of the assessment and brainstorming and re-envisioning what the future system looks like. And from there, we can thinking about where we go directionally about this IRS system. So that was the primary drive. Then we moved to the very quick the process. We formed the task force, and I was the chair of the executive committee. So I took that responsibility to form the task force. The task force meant to be the members of the task force. We come out some of the criteria. For example, we have the 118 members. We want to be representative. So our task force, including the AR libraries and 4 years college, 2 years college, public, private. But we also want to be agile, representative, but also agile. And certainly one of the criteria we very much emphasize when I select members is be strategic. We thought about who are the people serve the task force. Usually when you're talking about the system, people serve the task force could be down to the level of the head of the systems and even the system librarians type of the position. But after directors debate, we believe we want to stay this strategic level of the membership at the director level. We did not including anyone under the directors. All the members, 10 members of the task force and other directors from the different segment of the membership. Certainly we want to select the members who can really think out of the box and who are very well connected, not only just their library world, but the service scope and responsibility in their university and their parents' organization as well. So we end up have the 10 members, and we invite the senior managers from the Ohio Link to join us. Then we contract with the Ithaka, SNR, and Roger and his team for the work. The work was originally designed for about 10 months, but it took a little bit longer over the particularly market consolidation happening, and we have some extra work of the environmental discussion over there. Then eventually we come out with this white paper, and Roger going to talk about in the detail. The ultimate goal for this task force and the white paper, I should point out, is not function as the blueprint for the Ohio Link to choose our system. It's more about this is the brainstorming outcome from the community of the Ohio Link. We want to make a statement. The statement we want to make is to encourage our community and from both the library side and the user side and the vendor side, from the entire ecosystem, to create this open dialogue about what we really need for our future system, and that's what we intend to do. From there, I'm going to turn the time to the Roger and to tell you the more detail about the report. Then we're going to open up for the conversation. Roger?
Thanks so much, Xuemao. And thanks everyone for joining us today. At a very high level, this was what I think we wanted to introduce as our approach into thinking about library systems. And our thinking about library systems was not just about the ILS specifically or the LSP specifically, because there are other kinds of library systems, other kinds of systems that libraries use and operate and interact with. But our high level engagement was really that library systems should be enablers of the strategic directions that the libraries themselves, in service to their parent institutions, are trying to pursue. But too often, these systems have, instead of serving as enablers, they've actually served as impediments, making it harder to achieve the strategic direction that otherwise would have been pursued. That was really, at a very high level, what we were looking at. I'm going to just walk through a few slides outlining some of the key insights from the report. Many of you I know have had a chance to read it already, so this is really just meant as a quick intro or a quick refresh to allow us to get into a little bit more dialogue. But in terms of the market factors that we saw impacting the situation today, because we recognize that one of the real pleasures of working with this task force was a true mindset, an understanding around the market dynamics and the market realities around how investments in systems have been made over the course of time, and some of the strategic dilemmas that then introduces. So some of the key market factors that we considered was that what I've conceptualized as the race to the cloud, the race to move providers' systems into cloud-based library systems, has required fairly large-scale capital investment that only a few of the providers, only a few of the companies and not-for-profits in the library systems landscape could manage. That shift to the cloud, as I think everyone will recognize, has enabled some important new features. It's also raised expectations among users, among libraries in some important ways. And as a result of this race to the cloud, the capital investments that only a few could manage, there's a noticeable decline in the number of meaningful competitors in the systems marketplace for academic libraries than was the case a decade ago. We've just seen a lot of the consolidation that Xuemao was speaking about a moment ago. But even so, it's not clear that some of the systems that have been marketed as next generation or cloud-based systems, it's not clear that these even today have met the full range of current needs. And I think that's a conclusion that I think was a hard one for the working group to reach, but one that took us a while to get to, but was an important realization when we got there. You know, just to take a couple of examples of where today's business requirements, the business requirements that the OhioLink members see for themselves that they don't see met in the current crop of offerings. Data limitations, a lack of standards, profusion of separate and siloed platforms, even among the next generation systems, that has created just enormous challenges in moving data back and forth, in standardizing it, in making it interoperable in a live way. So data limitations is one thing. And the second one that I would mention is that the modern library is digital first. And I mean, obviously, in light of the disruptions that almost all academic libraries are seeing today, you know, the modern library is not only digital first, but today digital only in many cases. And so we were coming at this from the perspective of its platforms should be digital first in the way that they're provided. From everything we saw, from everything we studied, from everything we learned, it does not feel like any platform has a first-rate solution to managing and making discoverable e-resources. And that's something that felt like a real impediment in terms of the abilities of the current platforms to provide for the current business requirements. So OhioLink, you know, against this kind of sense of inadequacy of current offerings, the working group pulled together a vision not of what would it take to improve the platforms to meet today's requirements, but rather what is the underlying vision of what we think library systems need to be able to do in order to serve as those strategic enablers that I was speaking about a few minutes ago. And that vision has 4 components to it. I'm not going to try to get into any great specificity on any of these elements. You can consult the report for a lot more detail, but just again to provide it at a high level, the four pieces were these. Number 1, to center on the user. This is a key part of the vision that the OhioLink group came together with. Libraries have been talking about focusing on the user, reorganizing, recentering around the user for years now, actually, moving beyond the collection as the organizing principle and towards the user as the organizing principle. Whether libraries have done everything they could do or everything they will do in this respect is not really the point. The point for our purposes is that every library system in existence today is centered around the collection of a given library, and I'll say even more so, and we'll come back to this in a moment, even more so around the print collection of a given library. And this institutionally focused, collection-focused element of the system's design is really incompatible with the direction that libraries themselves are trying to take around centering and focusing on the user. As we all know today and have known for some time, the typical academic user is not interested in just the collections of this institution, of one institution, and certainly not just the print collections, just the published collections. They're interested in discovering and accessing not only publications, but primary sources, not only print, but also electronic, not only published, but also primary sources, and not only those at their local institutions, but really all of those that they might have access to through collaborations like OhioLink, like CRL, and other kinds of non-local collections. And what we recognized was that these discovery and access processes often don't happen for the user any longer. This is something that's also been recognized for a while. They don't happen for the user any longer as I need to go to the library. They happen as part of a larger set of research or teaching or learning workflows. And the library is not any longer the primary starting point, whether physically or virtually. And so all of these factors are ones that led us to say that the current generation of systems, even the newest generation of systems, has not fully centered on the user, and indeed is still unduly centered on the collection of a given library. So that's element number 1. Element number 2, with a nod to Lorcan Dempsey and some of his colleagues at OCLC that have done wonderful work to try to call to our attention the importance of the facilitated collection, what they've called the facilitated collection. As I've already made a little bit of reference to, libraries' collections roles have expanded for years now, far beyond building local, tangible collections. And the role that they've taken instead is facilitating access to collections across an array of formats, whether that be collecting or licensing or digitization or providing for open access, an array of collaborations. So all of that work to facilitate the collection, to facilitate access, to facilitate discovery is equally important if you think from a user-centered perspective as the local collection. And library systems today remain unduly focused on the tangible collections of individual institutions. So we're looking for, the OhioLink team was looking for systems that really embraced this idea of a sort of multi-engagement for any given library around different kinds of collaborations, different kinds of formats, different kinds of access models, and trying to understand how systems could truly embrace and center themselves around user needs in the environment of a facilitated collection. A third element of the vision was institutional integration. Library systems have often been designed as silos, separate and apart from the other systems that exist within a higher education institution. And anyone who has worked to integrate the library system just to make circulation, the circulation work of a library system keep pace with changing enrollments and registrations and all of that, knows that those integrations are often vexed at best. But today the library is increasingly integrated into any number of different research and teaching and learning processes within the university or college. And yet, other than for basic business processes, like some of those that I was mentioning a moment ago, library systems tend to be almost entirely siloed from research workflow systems, from instructional and learning workflow systems. And so our working group felt very strongly that the library system must be designed to be thoroughly linked to, maybe not integrated with, but maybe integrated with those other systems that support research, teaching, and learning in higher education. And then finally, in most integrated business intelligence, this is something that we came back to again and again. In so many other sectors, digital tools have made it possible for organizations to vastly improve the basic business intelligence that they have available to them. As you probably may know, modern business intelligence, it should enable libraries to do so many activities that are hard to do now, to analyze, improve, and communicate their value, to optimize their operations, to strengthen their negotiating position with their vendors, with publishers, and so forth. Library systems can do little of this. They've made some steps in the right direction in terms of providing better analytics today than once was the case in the past, but there is a long way to go in terms of thinking about modern and integrated business intelligence. If library systems were integrated with other, or linked to other systems within the library or within the broader higher education institution, there would be some meaningfully greater opportunities to improve services for users and the business intelligence necessary to optimize the academic library. So that's really where we were coming from with integrated business intelligence. So let me spend a moment or two talking about the reception that the report has received in some, I don't mean in terms of on social media and things like that, but in terms of what the task force and OhioLink itself was looking for, which was to try to influence the marketplace for library systems. The point here wasn't to write a beautiful report and see it tweeted a lot or give a lot of presentations about it, though we're happy to do that. The point really was to try to influence the market for these systems and to ensure that market competition remains strong and to ensure that lots of entities have a chance to think about how to respond to what we believe is a strong vision that will be shared by many other organizations, not just by OhioLink and its members, but many other organizations in higher education and academic libraries. We've seen some very, very positive reception, both at a staff level for recognizing some of the shortcomings of the existing class of systems, and at a leadership level for presenting a vision that may not be perfect, but it's been heartening to hear that it provides a starting point of generating a vision that could be much more widely adopted or shared across the academic library community. We've heard a lot of interest privately from some vendors about this vision. And here I'm not referring just to what you might think of as the usual suspects in library systems. We've heard some very substantial interest from other kinds of providers in the workflow space, in the platform space, that go well beyond the traditional library systems providers. And it will be interesting to see whether what arises is a new set of offerings that introduce perhaps some new competition, renewed competition into the marketplace, perhaps that help to offer some alternative models for what library systems could look like, because we've had even the open source alternatives that have been developed in recent years, although they have helped to diversify and in some ways provide some new sources of competition, have also adopted some of the fundamentally flawed, what we see as some of the fundamentally flawed or outdated paradigms that have informed the commercial providers as well. So we're really hoping that some of the implications of this work will be to help stir the pot here a little bit, introduce some new thinking, bring forth some new ideas, and hopefully provide an opportunity for some new paradigms to enter this marketplace and help the academic library engage in, have systems available to it that can serve a little bit more as those strategic enablers that I was talking about before, and certainly not any form of impediment. Now, in terms of next steps, we are continuing to a lot has been disrupted over the last few months for all sorts of things and in all sorts of ways. But we are interested still today in these issues. We believe that these issues are even more present and in some ways even more vexing in the current disrupted environment for academic libraries and leaders, academic libraries and users than was even the case before. Some of the limitations around being able to center around the user, limitations about being able to really embrace a facilitated collection that goes beyond local tangible holdings. These kinds of things matter today and will matter in the future only more than ever before. And so we hope that others will be interested in, I think OhioLink's hope here is that others will be interested in considering what might arise from this vision. So let me stop there. Xuemao, I don't know if you would like to say any closing words before we turn things over to question and answer and discussion more broadly.
Yeah, we got some question come up now. We can directly enter into the conversation. I think you summarized pretty well about the report already. So it looks like we have the first question here.
Diane, are you going to lead us through discussion, or would you like us to jump right in?
It's fine by me if you would like to jump in, or I can get started fielding that question for you. And why don't I just go ahead and read that question straight off the bat. And just to introduce everyone, I'm Diane Goldenberg-Hart with CNI, and welcome to today's webinar. So our first question today is, I'd like to hear more about the strategy of looking to the marketplace, for example, opening a dialogue with vendors, rather than a strategy of looking to the community itself. Is there a sense that a library community-created system cannot be created, sustained, and that only the for-profit market is robust enough to serve these needs? In a nutshell, why the focus on the market rather than the community in order to meet user needs? And she further clarifies, she doesn't mean open source necessarily, could be a build their own for OhioLink that isn't open.
So we did a little bit of analysis of this as part of the project. Maybe I should talk a little bit about the analysis, Xuemao, and you'd like to talk about OhioLink's perspective?
I can talk about the culture of the OhioLink potentially. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So we looked at the history of library systems development over the previous decades. As some of you know, many, if not most, of the library systems in use today have their some of them anyway, have their history as systems that were created at individual institutions. So for those of you who are familiar with Marshall Breeding's wonderful chart of all of the mergers and acquisitions that took place in the systems marketplace over the course of time, many of the origin stories of the library systems was, this service at Virginia Tech and that service at Cornell, and this one I don't have it all at hand. But in every case, there was a need at a certain point as there was an effort to scale up those systems to capitalize them in a way that even a single higher education institution or probably even a medium-sized to large consortium wouldn't be able to do itself. If we look at some of the efforts around open source systems, we can see some similar dynamics around what has been sustained, what will be sustained, what has not been sustained. So we were being very pragmatic, and although trying not to rule out any possibilities whatsoever, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we wanted to publish the paper in the end was to make sure that the vision would be widely available to anyone who might wish to take it up. But I do think that there was a certain basic question about who will have the capital resources, who's positioned to have the capital resources, even from a philanthropic perspective, who's positioned to have the capital resources necessary to make these kinds of investments. Xuemao, let me turn things over to you with that.
Yeah, in terms of the potentially, can I imagine the OhioLink build ourselves, such the system? I have to say, perhaps not. The reason is that you look at the people are the workforce working in the integrated library system. You look at any of your organization, when you are expand the scope of the digital initiative, you actually are not starting from there. You usually starting with new sets of the workforce, whether it is the digital scholarship center, research data team, and they are starting to build some of other sense platform actually relatively independently apart from the IRS team. So what I try to say is that not only we may not have that expertise, I don't think we have that mindset in our collectively OhioLink IRS system about that user-centric. I don't blame them. They have been working in the years surrounding with this IRS workflow, those built surrounding the traditionally connection-centric, not the really expanded the scope of the service. So I don't say the OhioLink will be able to collectively build our own next generation of the system.
Thank you. Thank you, Xuemao. Thank you, Roger. And just by the way, that question was from Lisa Hinchliff. So Lisa, thank you very much for that great question. And I just want to remind everyone that we are open for questions now. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box. We'll be fielding them live. We also, just referencing Xuemao's call earlier and Roger's as well, to make this an open discussion. We have the ability to turn your microphones on. If you want to make a comment or engage directly with Roger or Xuemao, please raise your hand, your virtual hand, and we will move you into the panelist arena so that you can dialogue directly with them. This is a great platform for being able to do that. I want to remind everyone that this webinar is part of CNI's ongoing virtual membership meeting, spring 2020 virtual membership meeting, which is going on until the end of May. And I'm just going to share with you the direct link to our schedule for the rest of the meeting. And I ran into this problem last time, and I'm going to trouble you again. Sorry about that. There's the direct link to the schedule. So please take a look and sign up for more webinars. We hope to see you back. And we have another question now. The question is a congratulations to our speakers for a very good presentation. And the question is, OhioLink is a very diverse organization with over 100 members. How do you make sure that the diverse needs are met in this planning process? It's a great question.
Okay, Roger, I can go first. You can join me. Hi, Peng, thank you for that question. I'm glad you're on. Yeah, you were here in the OhioLink. You knew the history. Indeed, when we select the task force, we thought about this issue. We want all the perspective. The expression and the needs expression in that 4 category Roger talking about actually reflect diverse perspective from the membership. It's not only just the ARL type of the libraries needs. In the discussion over the task force, we try to cover that diverse perspective. It is our hope, whatever the community eventually gather together to come out more robust, comprehensive criteria for the future user-centric system, it will be very much modularized in a way and flexible enough, and the different libraries, different size of the library, different focused mission of the library can adapt them in a very modularized way. We talked about that. I do understand the AR libraries needs is very different than the 2 years the college, right? So that's what we have been discussed. Roger, you have any observation over the task force?
Yeah, I would say that one of the reasons why I think the vision here is one that really could be widely shared, even beyond OhioLink, is as Xuemao was saying, the membership of the consortium, but also the membership of the task force and the and also focus groups we did and other research we did along the way was very, very diverse from an institutional type perspective. One of the most diverse groups in that sense that I've ever had a chance to work with. I would, and I think that we actually intentionally held aside some ideas that if we had just been doing this, inside of a group of ARL institutions, let's say, or for that matter, just been doing it inside of a group of community colleges, we probably would have come up with a vision that had additional elements either way. And we decided to really focus on the things that we felt were shared across all of those organization types. So, if we had just a group of community colleges, it probably would have been much more integrated. There would have been a lot more work to talk about integrations with testing and wellness and some other issues. If we'd been looking at health sciences libraries, probably much more of an integration into clinical care solutions and how to think about that. If we thought about research universities, we talked a little bit during the course of the working group about research workflow tools and some of the ways that the Elsevier's and Clarivates and digital sciences of the world are really offering workflow that in a way needs to connect with the library. But we decided not to emphasize any of those things in this report to try to look at something that would be more of a shared or common vision.
That's great. And of course, there's plenty here that crosses all of those spheres. But thanks for raising that great point, Haiping. And he thanks you for that answer. We have plenty of time here for more questions, and we would actually really like to hear your comments as well about the report, about some of the attrition in the marketplace, and even some of the new issues that have popped up as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. So the floor is open. If anyone would like to raise their hand, make a comment, ask a question, please feel free to do so now. And just as a quick reminder, again, this is part of CNI's virtual membership meeting 2020. We have a couple more sessions coming up later this afternoon. We'll be hearing from Jennifer Van Opel and Mary Beth Snap on DevOps is bigger than IT, driving digital transformation in libraries. And afterwards, we'll be hearing from Jamie Wittenberg on empowering data-driven research through an open, accessible data infrastructure. Both of those very compelling topics, and more to come throughout the week. Just waiting here to see if we've got any more questions, and I see that Lisa Hinchliff has got another question for you, and Lisa asks, how will Ohio Link evaluate the impact of this white paper? If they find the marketplace responding sufficiently that it is worth issuing an RFP?
Okay, that's a very good question, Lisa. We are in the transition of the Ohio Link leadership. You know, the Grant Evans has been moved on to another job, and we have the interim director here, and the community was about working with the state Department of Higher Education, talking about succession planning, but the pandemic suddenly shut down everything, changing the direction. So I would say, from my point of view, Lisa, to evaluate impact is how many people like this kind of decision. We can talk about this report, not put them on the shelf. And also, certainly, I'm very care about the vendor community's reaction. Roger mentioned that. I already been approached by several vendors to talk about this. Again, the pandemic had shut down those opportunity. I more think it's looking for the reaction from the non-traditionally library vendors. I would like to see some of the new enters, some of the .com company and even the startup are be interesting to thinking about this space. What we're looking for, again, the criteria is just a starting point for the dialogue. We hope the community eventually come out a much more robust, comprehensive criteria to express the 4 pillars we set up over there, or even the additional pillars. But the point is, the currently offering does not meet our needs, and our needs is continually growing. Who are the people can follow this route to address our needs now and in the future, and willing to keep change, not to sell us something designed for the 25 years ago our workflow, right? So that's one of the things we were trying to evaluate the impact. Roger, you have anything to add?
I think that was perfect. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very interesting answer to a good question. Thanks, Lisa. And we have a really interesting question that's just...
And by the way, Dan, one more add about RFP. We are at Ohio Link at this moment, because of the leadership transition and because of the pandemic. Even before that, we were nowhere near to issue the RFP because we don't believe there is the offering we are interested to buy at this moment. Right.
Excellent point. So this is another interesting question, I think, on a topic that you didn't touch on in your presentation. This comes from Robert Hilliker. Thinking about what you learned in the process of preparing your report, what do you think the implications are for library staffing?
Wow, that's a very good question. I can go first, Roger.
Sure.
You can talk about broader. I can talk about using my Cincinnati as the example. Okay, I'm the dean here. I'm the vice provost for the digital scholarship. I'm responsible not only just for the library, but for the university-wide of the digital scholarship implementation as well. So implication to the library staffing. I would like to see more integration, Robert, with my truly integration with my library IT team, with my digital scholarship center team, right? They both have the developers, they both have the technology workers, but their workflow is, I would say, digital scholarship center is much more forward thinking and outside external user engaged. Library IT, IRS team is still very much internally focused and the library workflow focused. I like to see the new system, this new future direction of the system bring them truly together. There's hardly a way to differentiate which one is working on the user engaging the system, which one is also working more of the collection-centric system. So in the many ways, if we're talking about staffing expertise, I would say I would like to see library IRS staff member learning more about what the digital scholarship center is doing in terms of technology, and vice versa. The digital scholarship center people understand more deep about the IRS system and particularly the future direction of the IRS system, right? So that's one thing I can think about. Roger, you have any broader observation?
Yeah, that's great. I just add one or two things. Coming back really to my laying out of the ideas of impediments and enablers. And I think what certainly what we heard in the course of doing the project was that one of the impediments to making certain staffing adjustments, moving people from more traditional roles towards roles where they may have more contemporary or immediate need or value, is that the systems themselves were not always making those transitions possible. And so I think that one of the hopes that that some of the participants anyway in the process have had is that if the systems were served as enablers, a lot of the work around, just to take one example, one traditional example, a lot more efficiency could be brought to the work of print collections management in terms of thinking about that as a networked activity rather than just an institutionally based activity. And so one of the things that you'll see a little bit of a thread of in the report itself is, not so much that the OhioLink directors or OhioLink itself is committed to rethinking print collections management, right? Just to take that as an example, but rather a knowledge that it cannot do that so long as the systems are architected the way they currently are. And so, with the idea of doing a more fundamental rethinking of an activity like that in a more networked or consortial or collaborative basis, of course, there could be implications on staffing of all manner of things. And I think that's just one in one sense, one traditional example, but I think there are others if you look at the report as well.
Thank you.
It's a great question.
Yeah. We have another question that's come in from an anonymous attendee who thanks you for your excellent talk, first off. And they ask, the idea of a common vision tends to lead to an expectation that there is a single integrated system. How do you reconcile this tendency with the idea of modularity? Whether you turn to the community or to the marketplace, is the answer a single integrated system or something more complex?
Well, I might jump in there if it's okay. We pushed hard at the term integrated, the I in ILS, integrated library system. And we some of us, I don't want to say that this is something that was shared and that necessarily made it into the report, but I think there were a number of people around the table who felt very strongly that that in fact the integrated nature of the library system may have been one of the things that was holding back innovation. So in other words, the fact that the same system was responsible both for basic managerial tasks around an individual library, acquisitions, budget management, collection management, et cetera, circulation, et cetera, or, from the perspective of an organization, and then trying to wrap something that was intensely user centered around that, that there was just some mismatches there. So we actually ended the report. It was maybe more of a teaser than some would have liked, but we ended the report with a bit of a teaser to ask whether what we really should be looking at in the future is perhaps a disintegrated library system. I think that, I think the idea here is maybe, modularity has a certain kind of idea to it, and someone whose wisdom I respect very, very strongly, once shared with me his insight that to the extent that you try to modularize offerings from different companies, you actually force them to go through, you force the interactions between the different providers into a kind of least common denominator solution. And so, modularity may not actually be precisely what we may be looking for, but the idea that maybe, this is just speculation here, but maybe the right answer today is not a single system, but maybe that there should be two or more systems that are organized differently. It's not the ILS versus the repository is kind of is one way that many libraries have their systems architected today, or the ILS versus discovery is another way. But rather maybe it's library management versus sort of user-facing elements, or maybe there are other ways to think about different paradigms for what the systems might look like. So I think what I really want to emphasize is that to the extent that this is a common vision, to come back to the question, to the extent that this is a common vision, and I do think it was a common vision across OhioLink, and I do think it shows promise of being shared more widely, but I don't think that by any means that we think either that means there should be a single system at a given institution, and certainly nor does it mean that any of us thought there should be a single provider across the community. I think, just to make sure to hit that one very, very directly, we felt very, very strongly that what was needed was more competition, more innovation to try to produce some of the outcomes that as Xuemao was talking about a moment ago, the working group was looking for. Xuemao, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think you said very well. The integration really does not mean a single provider. We don't intend to see any of the vendors grow even bigger and take more of the library workflow under their umbrella. We are looking for the opportunity, different kinds of the vendors, from the courseware, from the CRM, customer relationship management, from an enterprise ERP system. All of those are being able to integrate. That integration is talking about campus-wide technology ecosystem integration, right? At this moment, you think about our IRS, you even think about our digital repository. It's very siloed in the university ecosystem, right? This is one of the barriers. We no matter how hard we sell, people still don't recognize us very much. Right? So that's very much library thing, right? How can we do that in the not? That's just the library thing. This is really academic system. Mm-hmm. It's part of academic system. That's what we're talking about, the integration in that means.
Yeah. Thank you. So we still have time for more questions if there are any other questions. Again, we invite you to raise your hand if you would like to make a comment about your own experience, your own thoughts on this issue, or if you would like to engage directly.
Diane, I have a question for the audience to see if people can contribute.
Mhm.
So you heard from me and Roger, we want to create the broad dialogue about some people can participate, enhance this kind of the vision and the criteria. How can we do that? What's the venue? What is the way, in addition to the white paper, we can create some of the momentum and the people can join us to talking about this?
Anyone would like to address that question live? There's the, you can raise your hand in the box. You can type your comment in the chat. You can type your comment in the Q&A. We'll read it aloud. Any comments on that question from Xuemao?
Maybe people is typing.
All right. Well, if folks want to get in touch with either of you after this session, I think, I'm not sure if you made your contact information available on that last slide, Roger, but I did share the report with everyone through the chat. So I will do that one last time just to make sure.
And I'll be very happy to put my email address and Twitter handle into the chat as well, in case anyone wants to.
That would be great. Thank you. So if you just check out the chat box there, Roger has shared his contact information with you. So please feel free to get in touch with him or Xuemao.
I'm sharing my email too.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to thank our presenters for coming to CNI and talking about this really interesting report and engaging the community in this way. I also want to thank our attendees for taking time out of your day to attend this webinar, and I hope we'll see you back at others. I'm going to end the public part of this presentation, and I think Roger and Xuemao and I will probably stay behind for a little bit, and if others want to sort of approach the podium, please feel free to do so. And with that, I will thank you again for your presentation. I see I have thank yous coming in through the chat to our presenters, and be well, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.